According to the latest surveys, Denmark is the second hardest place for expats to make friends in the entire world. Only Kuwait is worse. This means that if you could teleport from Denmark to basically any other country, you would have an easier time making friends there than you have here in Denmark. And I can confirm personally that this is true. I have lived and traveled across most of the world, and then I have also spent most of the past 12 years in Denmark. It's beyond a doubt that in Denmark it's really hard to make friends again in comparison to the rest of the world. But hard is not impossible, and today I'll tell you 3 reasons why it's complicated and then 5 things you can do right now to still have a thriving social life in Denmark. Reason number 1 is a reserved culture of the Danes. Let me start with a story. I did group yoga classes a few years back and nobody, and this is literally nobody, spoke with each other before or after the class. I thought this could be because of the meditative vibe of yoga, but again, I'm right now taking my kids to swimming classes and it's the same. Nobody socializes, nobody speaks before, nobody speaks during the class, and nobody speaks after. It's crazy. And again, even I remember when I was doing yoga, I was like, oh, nice. I would start a conversation with someone. And they were like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me that I was making a conversation? Again, this doesn't apply for every single activity, but it's kind of the norm for a lot of situations here in Denmark. Danes are very reserved. This can come across and absolutely feel like coldness or aloofness. And it, again, makes it very hard for expats or foreigners to break the ice and establish real connections with the locals. The way it works in Denmark is that Danes tend to form close-knit circles of friends, and they're not as open to meeting new people as people from other cultures are. Danes prefer to socialize in those type of intimate and cozy settings, and it will be difficult, not impossible, but again difficult for newcomers to break into those existing groups. Most of the times you'll need to build a new social group, I would say. Reason number 2 is that Denmark is a high trust society. Denmark consistently ranks as one of the most trusting countries in the entire world. And while many of us see this as an absolutely positive quality, one of the underpinnings of why Denmark is great in many different ways, being such a high trust society means that there's even a barrier for newcomers to build connections, because again, Danes tend to be more cautious when it comes to new people, especially if someone is an expat or a foreigner, and it takes time for them to build trust once meet someone for the first time. The thing is that once again, one of the flip side is that once you have developed this trust, the trust stays, and you could count on a Danish friend to be your, to have your back, to believe in you, and much more than you would perhaps expect from a friend at home. But again, this means that in practice, for many expats, this process of making friends can feel painstakingly slow and frustrating, could be a lot longer than, again, how quickly you would make friendships in some other place. Reason number 3 is the language barrier. Look, everyone in Denmark speaks English, perfect English, but nonetheless, if possible, Danes prefer to speak their own language with their friends and family. Again, it's always odd when there are 4 people or 5 people and you're the only one who speaks English and everyone is speaking Danish and they want to switch because of you. And while most Danes will do this out of politeness, the language will be a barrier for you integrating, no doubt about it. So far so good. If you're going to Poland, I guess Polish people will prefer to speak Polish, or if you go to Mexico, Mexicans will prefer to speak Spanish as well. What makes Danish incredibly hard is that many times, even if you speak Danish, people will not want to speak Danish with you. And I can tell you my own experience. I speak Danish fluently. You can obviously tell I'm not a native, I have an accent, but even now, despite I speak Danish fluently, there's certain cases, there are situations that happen quite often where I start to speak to someone in Danish and they answer to me in English. I keep talking to them in Danish and they keep answering me back in English. And I'm like, what the guys, it's super annoying. I speak Danish fluently. Just imagine if you don't really speak very well. But despite these headwinds, you can still have a thriving social life in Denmark. Let's go through how, from the easiest way to the hardest way. And also, before you start, you should definitely subscribe to the channel because I post videos like this every single week. Action number 1 is to make expat friends. Yes, I know you're in Denmark, but if you want friends and a social life quickly, don't socialize with Danes and focus on expats. This is especially true if you come for work, meaning that you need to build build social circles from scratch. It's likely that your expat colleagues will be the best ones to start making friends with or being in a friends group, and again, check in other expat groups and so on. I'm gonna get into the more tactical points in a minute, but let me stress again, if you want friends fast, focus on other expats first. There's a big drawback on this, as I have noticed myself for the past many years. A lot of the expats tend to leave at some point Denmark because they go back to their home country, because they get to go and work somewhere else. I had most of my very best expat friends leave Denmark after some time, and that kind of sucks. It's a solid proposition, but again, it's not the long-term solution. In the meantime, it's something good to start. Action number 2 is to be where the action is. If you are living in Herning, or if you're living in Sonderborg, or if you're living in another small city and you're working there, I'm sorry for you, but you're gonna have a miserably hard time making friends unless you put heroic amounts of effort. It's the same if you come to Copenhagen and you end up working for a small company or have mostly Danish coworkers. This doesn't even to be a small company. Like, my own personal experience is that I used to work in Carlsberg, Denmark, like in the Danish office of Carlsberg, for almost 2 years, and I literally made 0 friends. And it was not for a lack of trying. Team and the company, again, that you pick for will make a big difference. After that, kind of miserable experience in Carlsberg, on the social piece at least, I specifically picked, and my next job, which was my first job in Maersk Procurement, I knew the team would be full of young people, of ambitious people, of international-minded people. Many of the Danes that I have as really good friends actually come from this time in Maersk. So I immediately made a lot of friends, and I was like, wow, this was the right pick for that part of my life for sure. So in all, context matters. Go where the action is. If you really want friends, prioritize that over a maybe higher paycheck. When I picked this Maersk job, I had other jobs that would pay me a lot more money, but I knew it would be the same boring setup or boring social setup as it was in Carlsberg for me. So I said, not at that time. Action number 3 is to join activities or clubs. I am lucky that I came to Denmark to study my master's in CBS, in the Copenhagen Business School. University is an easy, fun way to meet a lot of people, and I can attest that I had the time of my life during my 2 years of the master's. I basically had parties almost all of the time. I made a ton of friends, and it was super fun. And I never really, when people were telling me that Denmark was not a very social place, I was like, guys, I'm having the time of my life. So no point on that. And then ever since, I specifically joined a lot of groups and associations where things could be highly social. And of course, because also I wanted to meet cute girls and so on. But again, at the end of the day, I joined a lot of these things because I wanted to socialize. In CBS, I joined something called ISEC, and I joined other student organizations. And that's where my oldest Danish friends are from, because we had these big things in common and did parties like twice a week or something. I joined the choir. I mean, I can't sing. You can look at me and like, how can this guy sing? I can't. They needed voice, and they were fine with someone like me singing. And it was like over 50 girls. I was like, okay, parties all the time. Of course, I then went to join the choir. A lot of Danish friends I met through the choir. Entrepreneurship club, so I joined the entrepreneurship club in CBS as well. I had my startup, and I joined the local startup hub, again in CBS, and then I went to startup events, volunteered for startup events. So again, it was a lot of time and effort, all these things. It's not that you can just make friends while you're like in your room doing nothing, but it really worked. I made a lot of social contacts, and I had a really good social times and having fun. And over the past years, I also did, for example, improv theater, and I made a big group of friends from that. And like, I have friends that also do climbing or CrossFit, and they also get the same vibes. What you need to focus on is that look for activities where there must be socializing. As I told you before, yoga or swimming will not make the cut, but when you do, again, improv theater, or when you're looking into things like choir, that's definitely places where you can actually kind of by default you're obliged to speak with people. Action number 4 is to learn Danish. So in all cases, if you're planning to stay in Denmark, get your act together and learn Danish. Most people will appreciate it. It will make it easier for you to socialize, and there's absolutely no doubt about it, like 0 doubt. And crucially, speaking Danish will also allow you to participate in more activities. So if you're into art classes, or you're into a niche activity that is mostly Danes and non-expats in that kind of group, learning Danish will allow you to participate. And again, because of that, make more friends. Plus, it's not really that hard to learn Danish to a proper degree. I know most expats don't speak Danish, but again, like, to speak like a Dane is going to be really hard, but to speak fluently enough, as I do, have a thriving social life as part of that, it's not that hard. And I actually made a guide on that, and it's going to be linked down in the video description. Action number 5 is to play the long game. If I could summarize the whole spiel, it's like, it's not impossible to make friends in Denmark, but it just takes 10 times more effort than it does in other places. If you don't have friends in Denmark, it's because you have not put the effort period. So again, play the long game. Danes are nice, they're high trust people. If you put the effort, show your value, learn their language, adapt to their culture, of course you'll have a thriving social life. In all, Denmark is a great place. I love Denmark, and in this video you go through my 100 favorite things about living in Denmark. Thanks a lot, and there's a lot to love.